everything else is just sort of, you know what I mean? Like, let's, yeah. Okay, so. Howdy. Today, I'm going to be telling you what to like with this D&D tier list. Because D&D, as you know, is all about min-maxing and winning. So you want to know what the best choice is when you're creating your godlike character. So let's dive right in. First, we're going to look at the Artificer. Now, the Artificer is weird because it's sort of like a worse bard. A worse, spicier bard. Right off the bat, the most important aspect of the Artificer, wait as I eat a walnut, are their infusions. You can only change your infusions once every time you level up. This means that there is less maneuverability, less less utility because of the fact that you can't choose or refine based on the specific situation you're in. You can't possibly look in the future and see the specific magic item that you'll need. So a lot of the time, you'll end up picking the same couple. When you're in a campaign that is stingier with the rules, not stingier, but abides by the rules more, wants to throw in extra challenges, then the Artificer is basically forced into specific infusions. So again, Lamech, when he's playing Osiren, his infusions boil down to, I think, 3 primary ones. So it's Bag of Holding, Armor of Resistance, which is absolutely phenomenal, but becomes slightly useless if you have a Paladin on your side. And I'll talk about that later. And then he has Goggles of Night Vision, because darkness is very prevalent in my campaign. And then you get Flash of Genius. And this is where the comparisons between Bard and Artificer, I think, really begin. Because this is a worse bardic inspiration, and it is almost worse in every single way. They get less of them, and it relies on your intelligence modifier. Luckily, Osiren's intelligence modifier is +5, which is insane, but most people's would be at most +4. So you're end up getting a static +4, and you might say, oh, well, I mean, at least it's more consistent, and it is, and that's the only good thing about it. But if you have a level 7 to 8 bard, they have 1d8 bardic inspiration that they can use more times than the Flash of Genius can be used. Bards consistently get better, whereas a Artificer will most likely never get past +5. You know what I mean? I mean, even before this, Bards have the ability to do 1d6 from, I think, level 2, right? I will check that in the future. But, and that's a maximum of 6. And that doesn't even rely on their modifier, so it doesn't even matter. So, in terms of, and I'm not going to go into the latter levels of these, right? I mean, magic item savant and all that. I'm just going in from the, again, trying to rank people's late games is a lot harder than ranking their mid games, because that's where I think the balance of 5e really rests. Artificer. I'm going to add A+ tier. And I'm going to put Artificers in them. I think they're very strong. And I think their subclasses add a lot of utility to their base class. Again, I'm not talking about subclasses here. I'm just talking about the base class. I think they add a certain amount of utility, and I think that utility is everything as it pertains to the power of D&D classes, as this isn't a solo game. This is a team game. So utility is almost all the power of a character. So Artificer is definitely A+. Definitely below this guy right here, which is what I compare them to. But it is what it is. Blood Hunter. I think that is crap. I think Blood Hunters suck. No offense to Matt Mercer, but what a bad class. I don't even need to look at it. It offers some utility in the fact that it can hold person, but that is, in my opinion, all it does, really. Everything else is just sort of, you know what I mean? Like, listen, yeah. Okay, so they're cool. You know what? You know what I'm gonna do? They have aesthetic. I'll give that to Matthew Mercer. They look cool when they're sucking, but they still suck. But at least they look cool while they're sucking. Boom. Barbarian. They do big damage. And in the level range, yeah, I'll bring them up to B. And in the level range that I'm talking about, they can take a lot of hits. And in that way, they have utility. In the fact that they have a lot of survivability, in the fact that they have resistance to bludgeoning and slashing damage while in rage. So, they can survive a lot of hits. And they actually dish out a fairly consistent amount of damage while they're in rage, and they have reckless, so they can give themselves advantage, right? So that's great. And they get an extra attack. Yeah, they have a lot of utility that sort of keeps them in the fight for a long time. And that isn't as good as some of the other classes, but it is something. And they have more utility than Blood Hunters, because Blood Hunters just fall over. They just fall over dead. Along with this, Barbarians have the highest hit die. So they always have the most, or typically, if your players roll well, they have the highest amount of HP. Again, lending to this idea of the tank. Now, this falls off very hard late game, especially when you're talking about comparing it to Paladins or Fighters, which just get so much more in the later games. Let's talk about Bard. These dudes are nuts. Bards are straight up crazy, man. They have it all right? They have Bardic Inspiration. They have some of the best spells that they can choose from. They have some of the best class features. And they have a bunch of proficiency. They have Song of Rest, Expertise, tons of ability score improvements, Counter Charm, more Expertise, Magical Secrets. They're the best support class in the entire game. Yes. No cap. Absolutely. Bards are crazy. You have a bard on your team? That shit is, every single combat that you go into with a bard is made instantly easier because of all the things they bring in. And look at how crazy this shit is. Even before you even pick a subclass, don't even get me started on the lore. If you go bard lore, it might as well be SS. Actually, I'm going to add an entirely new one. It's going to be SS here. You know what? Actually, Bard SS tier, just because lore exists. I said that I wasn't going to talk about subclass, but the mere fact that lore Bard exists just makes it SS tier. Easily the best single class in the entire game without multi-classing. Again, they succeed in roleplay, they succeed in combat, they succeed in everything. You want a Bard on your side, no matter what type of campaign you're playing. Lighthearted, serious, combat-focused, RP-focused, it doesn't matter. Bards are straight up nutty. Actually fucking crazy. And there's really nothing else I can really need to say about that. Clerics, I think are A+. Actually, I'll put them in S. Actually, no. I'll keep them in A+. Because the Cleric spell list, I think, is some of the best in the game. But I think that their class features are lacking as opposed to some of the other ones that I'm going to talk about. I think they're sort of only propped up by the fact that Cleric gets a lot of spells that only Clerics can use. Bonus for Death Domain Cleric, which is saucy as hell. But negative points for Grave Domain, which I think is the most boring subclass in the game. No offense to Taliesin, but it is extremely boring. The only thing you really bring to the table as a Death Cleric is no critical, right? And then you just sit there and you really don't utilize any other class feature. Druid, I think, is S tier. Yeah. Peace Domain is pretty nuts, but again, when I talk about Paladin, I'm not going to be talking about Oath of the Ancients specifically either, which also breaks the game. Druids, I think, are one of the most slept-on classes ever. And I'm not just talking about Moon Druids. Again, no subclasses. I'm talking about their spell list in general and the fact that their class features, just on the aggregate, are so powerful and so game-shifting. Good berries are nuts. Yes, Moon Druid is very much SS tier. Just like Oath of the Ancients, and Peace Cleric would be SS tier as well. I might do a subclass one after this, but that would take a long time. We'll think about it. Yeah, so Druid, actually crazy. Let's take a look at some of their features. I'm not even going to go into the spell list for Druids because you're just going to have to take my word for it. Take one look at Druids. Not even their subclasses. They're at their spell list, and they have some of the most fun, flavorful, and powerful spells in the entire game that is specific to Druids. So no other class can use Goodberry, for instance. And again, Wild Shape is free. It's just a free thing. Obviously, you can only use it a certain amount of times. But what I mean by free is the fact that you don't need to be Moon Druid in order to Wild Shape. Moon Druid just enhances it. And Wild Shape is crazy. Gives you an entirely new health pool, and then you can just revert back to your humanoid form. And then you can use all the spells that Druid has at its disposal, or you can Wild Shape again. So you can either tank, or you can be one of the best spellcasters in the entire game. Whereas again, Barbarians, which we'll compare to just because of the tankiness aspect of it, really only does that one thing. Whereas Druids have, as I said previously, and what makes a class good, in my opinion, in Dungeons & Dragons, is its utility and its ability to help the team. And Druids have an abundance of that. It is a shame that you don't see Druids more frequently. Fighter, I think, are A+. Oh, fighter. And this specific list separates Gunslinger as its own separate class, and I think that's good because they are completely separate. Fighter has the highest damage output or possible damage output out of any class in a single turn in this mid-game range that we're talking about. They can attack, I believe, at a certain point 6 times in one turn without any other enhancements with Action Surge. And this isn't considering, magic items that enhance the damage or anything like that, but attacking 6 times, the ability to use every single martial, simple weapon in the game, or any heavy, medium, light armor in the game as well. They bring a lot. They can use shields. They have maneuvers if you're a Battlemaster, but again, we're not talking about subclasses. Fighter. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put this down there because I'm talking about utility. Really, honestly, if we're not talking about subclasses, fighters only bring big damn. And they can tank a lot because they can use shields and heavy armor, whereas, barbarians really rely only on their health and their resistance. However, to a certain degree, I think that barbarians' resistances to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage is sometimes better than having high AC. In certain encounters, not every encounter, but I think having half damage may be better than just hoping that they don't roll above a certain amount. It puts less emphasis on luck and puts more emphasis on positioning, strategy, things like that, right? But fighters do bring, absolutely, if we're talking about a level 13 Barbarian and a level 13 Fighter, I think that fighters have... level 13 fighters have a bigger possibility for damage. And yeah, like you're saying, Vlad, they do have more utility than barbarians. Barbarians have rage and recklessness, and that's basically all you do. And you know what? I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pull in Battlemaster because it's one of my favorite classes or subclasses in the game. Maneuvers and the just ability to choose Arcane Archer or Battlemaster, in my opinion, the utility that those subclasses can bring will bump Fighter up a bit, just because that's... but I don't want to, because, again, we didn't talk about subclasses. Regardless, Fighter has more utility. It has Second Wind. It has Action Search. It has all these things. Regardless of subclass, I think that even Fighter, just base, is better than Barbarian. And if we're talking about Barbarian subclasses, yikes. Totem Barbarian is the only one that's good. That's straight up facts. Monk. Oh my god. Not even aesthetic. I really don't like Monk. I think they are... oh my gosh, but I can't bring my bias into it. I think they're the same. I think they're the same level as Barbarian. Okay, so Stunning Strike alone, I think, brings them up to Barbarian levels. To a point where I'm almost... oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I think Monks are basically on the same level as Fighter. Stunning Strike literally brings them up from crap to awesome. That ability is busted. There's no size differentiation for Stunning Strike. You can use Stunning Strike unironically against Tiamat. A CR 30 creature who's a god. Rules as written can be stunned by a mean elbow. At 5th level, you could... jeez, man. I mean, and they just don't die either. They're able to move more than any other class freely. If you add Sentinel into it, it's just, oh, disgusting, right? Fall damage affects them less. A lot of people have big con saves. Yeah, let's bring up Tiamat, for instance. I think Tiamat has like plus 16 to her con save or something, right? No. It's actually only plus 10, right? So yeah, they roll like an 8. They succeed on it. But I roll like garbage as a DM. So, knowing my ass, I roll a natural 1. And then all of a sudden, this monk who doesn't need to expend basically any key points just makes me have to use legendary resistances on a mean elbow. Okay, yeah, all right. So the wizard, at this point, casting banishes, maybe even casting wish, right? And those are things that I would expect Tiamat to have to use legendary resistances on. But then all of a sudden, as the wizard is using like huge magics, right? And, the Artificer is whipping out their biggest infusions. The Paladin is bringing in some massive smites. And then you have a gnome monk. It comes in, smacks the elbow, jumps, I don't know, how big is Tiamat? Like 40 feet tall? To get to one of the heads, jumps standing 40 feet, or waits for Tiamat to, I don't know, come and sniff him or something. Even better, because how about we don't even have flavor, because there's no reason why Tiamat would be like just sitting there, right? Goes up to Tiamat's knee, climbs up, just con save. No, dude, that's unbelievable, dude. Listen. I'm sure players can really enjoy monks. But as a forever DM, fuck monks, dude. Especially at the lower levels. You try and add like a little bit of You know, you're like level 5, right? You bring in, I don't know, let's just say the most vanilla encounter, like Bandit Boss. Stunned. Entire encounter is like a stalemate for an entire turn. And then if you have a fighter, they have multi-attack, right? Multi-attack right there. Oh my god, if they have a gunslinger on the wings, they have stunned for an entire turn, they just let everyone just rinse down them. And you're not going to have like layer actions at 5th level because you don't want to be rude. Unless you're me, and you might want to be if someone played a monk. But that's why I put them at A tier. Because I also think that melee classes in general in this game have a hard time because of opportunity attacks. Getting, like, you know, closing distance can be difficult in some encounters. No, dude. See, you hate clerics. I actually really enjoy having healers because it means that I can make the encounters harder. And they can't blame me because you had Healing Word, right? I hate Healing Word. But I love it at the same time. Because if they're able to just resurrect someone on the fly, I can make people that really bully them, right? That's my rationale, at least. So, yeah, I'll put monks there. I think they're decent. Okay, paladins, baby. I'll put them on the same level as Druid. Paladins are crazy, dude. I love paladins. Paladins are my favorite class. Paladins are insanity. They deal so much damage. But they have all the proficiencies that fighters do when it comes to armor and weapons that fighters do. Oh boy, dude. Paladins, they come in, they can heal, they have nutty support, they do huge damage. Their class features are crazy because they have divinity, channel divinity, right? Oh my goodness. You come into combat as a paladin? Oh my good. Oh, what do I do in your turn? And you know, with a barbarian, you're like, I reckless, I rage. I reckless, I rage. With a paladin, oh man, you got, you know, your paladin spell list is every single paladin spell available, and you just prepare them on the day. Oh man, I'm talking about utility, and you're just like, they whip out a scroll, and they're like, what can I use today? And then you just pick it out. Not only that, but I have to do it. I have to do it. Oath of the Ancients is just so filthy. As a DM, I don't even care. You can't, because spellcasters are so crazy in the late game that if you have an Oath of the Ancients, you can do whatever the hell you want. You throw a Lich at a level like 13, they might actually be able to do it because of that magic resistance. That's so crazy. Actually, godlike. And they're paladins, so it makes sense. And yeah, paladins extremely strong. Smites, bonus action, sanctuary, extra attacks. Yeah, they have it all. And if you multi-class with a sorcerer, you're basically a boss. You can take everything on. Once you get to like level 8, and you have like 5 levels in paladin and 4, level 9 paladin, like 5 levels in paladin, 4 levels in sorcerer. You quicken spell, hold person, and then you just proceed to rail them, like erase entire people. At level 9, you're not fighting like huge things either. You're fighting like some things, right? But like you have a single humanoid in which you can hold person. Again, quicken spell, divine smite I think that at that level they'll have 2nd level spells, right? Paladin. And you divine smite a 2nd level. You probably have like a 1d10 or 1d12 weapon. So it's like 1d12 plus 3d8 plus an extra attack. So it's like 2d10 plus 3d12 auto crit because they're paralyzed. Hot diggity damn. That's a lot of damage. And then afterwards, they have a heal that doesn't even go off of their spell slots. Lay on hands is insane. The only downside, Paladin, and I wouldn't personally consider this a downside, is that you have to RP the zealousness in order for it to make sense, right? Paladins and clerics and druids are balanced in certain campaigns by having to justify having that power. Remember, because paladins and clerics are blessed by a god to basically be their arm so that they can influence the world through their power, but not actually directly doing it. You're like a middleman for an actual god, so you have to roleplay that correctly. But we're talking about combat right now, and that shit is great. Ranger, that's C tier. Not even going to talk about it. Rogues, actually, no, they're the worst class in the game, hands down. So, Rogue. Again, not talking about Ranger. Let's talk about Rogue. I think Rogues are great. I think Rogues are slept on, and I think they actually do give a lot of utility in terms of RP and combat. They are surprisingly difficult to kill. They have, I can't remember, it's not evasion, is it? Uncanny dodge and evasion makes them some of the most difficult damage dealers to kill in the entire game. With sneak attack that can be repeatedly used, depending on the situation, they're sticky. And that gives them a lot of potential in the fact that not every class that wears leather. In fact, I think that this is one of the only ones that wears leather that can actually counter saving throws effectively. And being able to counter saving throws, especially in the mid to late game, is unbelievably powerful. Again, if you're fighting a dragon and they use their breath on you, the ability to just take 0 damage from it when they're doing like 8d12 damage or some crazy stuff like that, very useful. Just being able to stay alive in fights, I think, is being able to stay alive in fights consistently. And Uncanny Dodge and Evasion give you that consistency. And in a game that is run very heavily by RNG, any amount of that you can get is great. And like you were saying, Vlad, Rogue and Bard are ironically, well, not ironically, but just so happen to be, in my opinion, some of the most consistent classes because of their abilities, right? Bard gives more consistency through Bardic Inspiration and expertise and all of these things, as with Rogue does with expertise and Uncanny Dodge and all that. So consistency, I believe, puts Rogue in the A tier. Sorcerer. I think Sorcerer is A+. I think Sorcerer is A+ tier. I think Sorcerers, just for the fun factor of it, are above, or actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put them in front of both Artificer. We'll level them here. I think monks are the best in the A tier. I think sorcerers, I think artificers are the worst in that tier. I think paladins are better in that tier. So I'd say the sorcerers are the best A+ tier, simply because meta magic is so much fun. I know people only use twinning and quicken spell. Those are the most powerful ones. So that's fine. If you want to do that, I mean, I'm not going to judge you. Being able to quicken a fireball, that's a good time. That's just straight up a good time. So, sorcerers with their meta magic, they also have Careful Spell, which is slept on heavily in certain campaigns. And then when you get into wild magic is, yeah, that's great. Wild magic is fantastic. They can do a lot of damage. They have a lot of utility, especially when it comes to meta magic and being able to use more in the action economy. And that's another thing that you need to consider that I haven't been talking about much. Your ability to utilize the action economy in D&D per turn is very important, and it adds to their utility. And sorcerers have very high action economy utility because of meta magic. And I think that makes them very useful, because sorcerers don't just bring damage as barbarians and fighters might. They also bring hold person, for instance. You can hold person, you can banish, You can do a whole mess of stuff to, you can slow, I believe, as a sorcerer. All these things in one turn. You can fireball, you can quicken hold person into a fireball. You can quicken slow at later levels into fireball. Everything goes into fireball, basically. But you can do it, and you can add a lot of control, right? I think sorcerers give a lot of control over the battle. And that's why I think that they're the top in the A+. Warlock. Base, I think, are below average. I think they're average. If we're not considering subclasses, I think that Warlocks are not all that great. Yeah, again, Hexblade, fantastic. I think it's one of the most fun classes in the entire game. I think Eldritch Invocations are also really, really cool. I think Eldritch Smite is excellent. I think that Eldritch Blast is obviously the best cantrip in the entire game. The best damaging cantrip in the entire game. Can be modified with Charisma. Really, really, really good cantrips. But that's really all they do most of the time. A lot of Warlocks that I have played with, a lot of Warlocks that I've seen be played, are very scared to use their spell slots because they have so few, right? So they end up just doing Eldritch Blast. Unless you're a Hexblade, in which case you can get up close and you bring utility with your curse and all of that. However, if we're not talking about subclasses, they don't bring all that much, right? They don't bring up, in fact, they only bring Eldritch Blast, really. And they have consistency, and that's why they're not down with Ranger and they're with Barbarian. They bring consistent range damage. But if I was going to talk about consistency, then Ranger has good, consistent damage. I'm just putting it in the worst because they're not fun to play. And that's it. Rangers just are not fun to play. They're barely played, so I don't really see much, But yeah, so Warlocks, their consistency and their flavor is really cool. But because no subclasses, we're not talking about subclasses right now. They are below average. Wizard, super, super cool. I think they're above. I think they're above Cleric. And let me tell you why. Because there's spell slots. Spell slots and their ability to have infinite spells in their spell book. They have no cap to the amount of spells that they can have, other than the amount of spells that the DM puts into the game. If there are spell scrolls in a game, then they can put it in there, and that makes Wizard so good. They have so much utility. The only reason why I don't put them ahead of... The only reason I wouldn't put them ahead of Sorcerer is because Sorcerer has the ability to do more per turn. I think their action economy is far more... I think it's far better. Again, if you look at the power spike, to give you an example of why I think more actions in a turn, I don't really need to. I'm sure you guys know this already. But the power spike for fighters when they get up to level 5 is insane simply because they get an extra attack. Just because they get that little extra boop, and they get that extra attack means that they are consistently better, right? Because of that ability to do more per turn. And I think that sorcerers have a lot of that. They have the ability to do more per turn if you are not considering magic items, which we're not, right? And we're not talking about the different subclasses for Wizard because they bring a lot to the table, right? Evocation Wizards add a lot of damage onto their thing, and Necromancers with the ability to summon more people into the fight, they give a lot too. However, at a base, their utility comes from the amount of spell slots that they can do. They are, I think, beasts of long-term combat. I think that they are extremely good for battles of attrition because of how many times they can cast spells. Arcane Recovery is great. Yeah, Divination Wizards and their ability to regain a spell slot later on, actually nuts. But everyone goes either Transmutation because of Caleb, or Evocation because Evocation Wizards are the jocks of the Wizard class, okay? Evocation Wizards are the wizards that pick on every other wizard because they think that they have big muscles, okay? When in actuality, Divination Wizards, I agree with you 100%. Divination Wizards can just keep going. Those fuckers have stamina. But yeah, so Wizard's ability to pick from their spellbook is phenomenal. The only reason I don't think that they are better than Sorcerers is because it is dependent on how many spells the DM puts in front of you as a wizard. Otherwise, I think they would be possibly better. But at this point, I think that they are below Wizards just by a slight amount. I think Gunslinger is one of the most poorly balanced classes in the entire game. I think their action economy is busted. I think that their ability to do damage is actually insane. I have to put him in S, dude. I have to put him in S. And I don't think they're as good as Druid because of the utility, but just the fact that, really honestly, it's the damage output. They benefit from the fighter archetype, so they have action surge, and they can attack 6 times with some of the most high-powered weapons in the entire game, with some of the largest range in the entire game. And that's completely forgetting the fact that fighters get an absolutely gargantuan amount of feats. So you can have Sharpshooter that goes with it, Firearms Specialist, Tough, Sentinel, whatever the hell you want, because you're a fighter as well, so you can wear any armor that you want. So you can have a breastplate, but you're a ranged person. But you also have more damage than any of the magical fighters in the mid-game. When you start mixing feats into it, and then you have magic items like Bad News, right? Bad News is the one that... right, I mean, like 2d12 piercing damage, dude? Like 2d12, man? Like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? That's 2d12, okay? 6 times in a turn. You're doing 12d12 base flat damage from just from attacks. That's without modification. That's without your dex mods. That's without any. That's without anything that's increasing the damage. That's without crits, right? But if you're talking about crits, it's a possibility of 24 d12 damage in one turn. That's insane. That's actually nuts. I don't know what Matt Mercer was thinking. And I don't know what I was thinking, allowing it into my world without any edits. Really, truly, they're crazy. They break the game mid-game. Yeah, it's actually nuts. But yeah, so there's the tier list. I agree with Vlad. Clerics possibly could be higher. Wizards possibly could be higher. Again, it's difficult with Clerics because you only get your channel divinities with subclasses, so we can't talk about channel divinity when it comes to Clerics. I think their spell list is really excellent, but again, a lot of their power comes from... No, a lot of their power does come from their spell list, as I was talking about before, but without channel divinity coming into play, yeah. They can do a lot, right? Because of the spell list, but again, they really... Okay, you know what? You're right, Vlad. Perhaps I'll rethink it. Because they do have Healing Word, and they do have some of the highest damage output, ironically, with Inflict Wounds, right? Inflict Wounds is... don't want to talk about it. Spiritual Weapon is also excellent. And they're also some of the best healers in the game. They don't have great action economy, though, right? Yeah, that is true, because of Healing Word. I guess I should... Oh my god, they do have good action economy because of their bonus actions, because of Spiritual Weapon, and because of that, right? I'm not putting them in S, but I will actually put them above Sorcerer. But I will not put them in Super, because I don't think that... I think... Look at it this way. I would rather have a Druid or a Paladin than a Cleric. Most of the time. I think that Druids and Paladins give more than Clerics do. Clerics are definitely excellent, and I will put them at the top of the A+ tier, but I don't think they bring as much as Druid and Paladin do. For so little. Druids and Paladins get so much. And if we're talking about Moon Druid, then the game's fucking over, right? They're up there with Bard. But yeah, Bard reigns supreme. Absolutely reigns supreme. They also have like absolutely excellent they have absolutely excellent subclasses. Bard does. Really, Bard is just like I think that someone at Wizards of the Coast really just plays Bard only, so they just make Bards crazy. They're rogues, but just like better, right? They're rogues, but they have better utility. It's like, Christ. But yeah, so that is the tier list. You can definitely see that Matt Mercer learned a bit when creating the Gunslinger and then created Blood Hunter, which is the complete opposite of the spectrum, which brings so little into the game. But there it is. There is the class tier list.